Hi everyone, I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Today, I want to talk about this idea of wage stagnation versus day rates or even just a contract value. And it's important for you to know the difference. Now, what am I talking about? When talking about wage stagnation, so to speak, I'm really indicating the fact that when it comes to wages, okay, when it comes to your pay, it's very difficult for you to command a certain amount, okay? It was very difficult for those wages to increase, okay, readily, so to speak, because these wages are dependent upon pay review boards, they're policy driven. There are certain things that you may have to do. Yes, some may argue, okay, but there are bonuses that you may need to achieve and all that kind of stuff there. Of course, that's very dependent upon performance within a stagnated environment potentially, okay? And the only way you can really increase it is if maybe one way you could do this is obviously track all of the things that you've done, evidence that okay, you've done way more than you should do for your job description if that exists. Okay, for many people it doesn't exist. And then you set up a meeting with your manager, your line manager, and you basically create a case for why you should be getting paid more money, okay, against your peers or whatever it may be. And then it may be accepted, it may not be accepted. And if it does get accepted, then you may get 5k more, 10k more, 15k more, 20k more. And that may be the route to go for many of you because you're in a situation where you need a certain type of mental stability, so to speak. You need that sort of like vibe, and therefore this is the route that you need to take. But therefore it requires some sort of laborious nature. Now the benefits of this is that at least you put yourself in a position where you're learning how to negotiate, you're learning how to evidence and articulate your value, because that is the most important skill. Knowing how to articulate your value, like, not aggressively but well. There is an art to it, okay? And it comes down to evidencing this stuff. Now, of course, in the same time, whilst you're doing all this stuff, okay, let's say it takes you 3 months to do, 6 months to do, 12 months to do, maybe even 24 months to do. Inflation is increasing. Things are getting more expensive. Your council tax is going up. Your bills are everything is moving nuts. Whilst you're trying to evidence this stuff to only add an additional 50 to 200 pounds every single month. And it's painful. It's painful to think like that, but it's true. I mean, like, we have to put it into context. And so when I think about wage stagnation, I think about, okay, from a contracting or consultant standpoint, what does that specifically look like? And of course, when it comes to, contractors or consultants, they can get a number of stuff. Now, I'm not talking about fixed term roles. Let me be clear here. Even though these are fixed term to a degree, there's a set contract, usually they get extended because there's a need. This is based on need. Contractors and consultants come in based on need. There is a gap that needs to be filled. There is a strategy that needs to be developed. There's a piece of work that needs to be worked up. There's some delivery that needs to be done. Rather than relying on a 3 to 6 month process to bring someone in, 17 days on average, that is the amount of time a consultant or contractor can come in. Whether they're inside or outside doesn't really matter. They can come in and do what they're doing. Of course, the outside IR35 consultant is going to be more readily available for a certain specialist approach, so to speak, potentially, because it's more project based, it's deliverables based, etc., etc. The inside, slightly different, but they can have that set up to a degree. But of course, organizations don't like to make contractors outside because they don't want the liability, the potential liability of paying a charge. But anyway, let me not get into all of that stuff. The point being made is that it is need driven. So you get to position your value, so to speak. Sometimes you don't get to position it because maybe you're inexperienced. And if you come through an agent or something like that, or a consultancy, they position it for you. As long as it's been agreed beforehand by you, they'll have that conversation with you. And so it's different. There's a sort of like a push and pull sort of aspect to it. And so in terms of like the whole stagnant situation, I've got my notes here as a sort of like a base here. Is the political nature of it and the speed. That's the frustration that some people have. Okay. And as a consultant or contractor, you don't get that sort of situation. You don't get that. It's different. Because you're coming in for a specific purpose. Now, before I get into all of that stuff, if you are interested in receiving information around consulting or contracting or portfolio careers, then feel free to subscribe to my newsletter, where I send you a newsletter item or topic, okay, every single Sunday at 2 p.m. So if that's something you're interested in and you want to learn more about how you can get into the space or even develop as a consultant or contractor independently, then subscribe to my email below. All right, let me get into it. So the next sort of thing I wanted to talk about is this whole idea of, typically when a consultant comes in, it's based on market demand. Okay. Now, let's say, for example, and this is why I talk about the whole economics of things, so to speak. I'm not an economist by any stretch of the imagination, but I am interested in trying to understand it more. Hence why I share it with you guys. But the reason I look into that stuff is because if I understand the measure of the priorities of the government, so to speak, that gives me an idea of what they're willing to spend. And if I know what they're willing to spend, I can see what potential opportunities are around, what is available, so to speak. Okay. And then I can have conversations with consultancies, with agents, or go into the right marketplaces to see what options are available for me to check into if I'm at a space or a stage where I want to accept more work. It's that simple. So it gives you an idea of priority driven. And so if the market highlights there is a priority for your specialism, you need to be on the hunt. You need to be on the lookout as a contractor or consultant. Of course, you can do the same thing if you're in a permanent 9-to-5, but you're not as fluid or flexible because there's a 3-month notice period or 1-month notice period. Some people end up lying, going sick leave, so they go to drastic measures to do all that stuff, and it gets all awkward and weird and stuff. You know, you have to think about, okay, there's a transition period and time before you can actually jump into a certain space, and then you have a probationary period. Like, it's long. It's like there's a lot to think about, you know. Not to say it's better for a consultant or contractor, but they developed a certain mindset to know that they could be gone within a day, or within a week or 2 weeks, because these days they're doing this whole week and 2 week thing, or even 4 weeks for some consultants, so to speak, as long as you agree with that as well as part of your contract. So market demand is a really important thing. The other thing I want to say is your sort of like rate as a contractor or consultant can increase based on specialism, based on reputation, and based on results. And I would also argue on demand as well. Yes, they'll try and lowball here and there, whatever it may be, but the fact of the matter is, if they need you, they need you. I'll give you a perfect example. So I'm currently within this current contract that I'm in, and there's 1 or 2 individuals who do certain things that no one else can do. It's very specific, okay? I don't want to get into any detail because I don't want to identify anyone, but let's say they know how to mine gold, okay? But they mine gold a certain way that no one else ever does it. Everybody wants this person. I've seen people scrambling over this person. There's no one else who does it. So they have found a specific niche that every single person wants within this industry or space. If you can find that, you can command the rate that you want. Or at least a rate that is higher than average because there's no one else like you. Is that going to happen to every single one of you watching this video? Of course not. I'm not going to lie to you and say that's going to be the case. Of course it's not. This is why you need to know what your range is, know what your lane is. And then if you ever get into a space where there is a certain niche, then of course you can be a bit more premium. Why not? Of course, you can bend the rules a little bit more. That's how it works. So you have to be patient in this game. But the point I'm making is there is a higher earning potential. Depending on who you're working with, depending on your experience, depending on how you brand yourself, depending on how you articulate your value, pretending on how pretending, not even pretend. We don't want to pretend here. We want no pretenders. Depending on how well you present yourself, okay? And also when it comes to rates and stuff, it's more transparent and it's easier to benchmark because you've got examples all over the place. You got so many examples. So you get to control your ceiling and you're not waiting on HR to determine that for you. Okay. Now, I've got some notes here. I've written here that employees focus on what will they give me? Benefits. I remember speaking to my, I want to say niece-in-law. Okay. Maybe a cousin-in-law, but niece-in-law. And they were comfortable being where they're at because the benefits are on point. They don't want to lose the benefits, which makes perfect sense. That's perfectly fine. Anyone can do that. As a contractor, you have to create your own benefit system. This is why you become more savvy with the finances, X, Y, and Z. Maybe not necessarily more so, but you may have a steeper learning curve in understanding your expenses, whatever those expenses look like, on your benefits, the ones that you create for yourself. Okay. So employees think more about what will they give me. Consultants focus on what can I charge for the value I bring. And of course, you got three camps. You've got the consultant. Well, you rarely have a consultant who does this. So I'm going to say contractor. You have a contractor who may charge per hour. Never do that. You have contractors and consultants who charge per day. Yeah, you can do that. You have consultants who charge based on what they're delivering. Definitely do that if you can. And there are not many people who can do that and do it well. Maybe you start off with the day rate and then you put in the amount that you're likely going to charge. It's that simple. Okay. And, a quick way of doing this is saying, okay, let's say, for example, you charge £500 a day. Okay. 500 times by 5 is 2,500. So that's for the week. For the month, it's going to be 10 grand a month. Okay. So 10 grand a month is what you would get. But let's say it's a 6-month contract. Okay. For this consulting gig. You're charging £60,000, and maybe there are additional resources that you may require. Maybe you need someone to support you, whatever it may be. Maybe it's half of precisely what you're doing. So rather than being a program director or manager, they're a project coordinator. So that's an extra £30,000 on top. So that's £90,000, and then you got £10,000 for contingencies. Okay, roughly, let's say. Not even 10%, I'd say roughly 15% or so, just to cover any contingencies. So that's £100,000 that you're charging for those 6 months. People are like, raw, 100,000. Obviously, that's all taxable money. So you're not getting that straight away. You're not going to get £100,000. It's going to be taxed. Of course, it's going to be taxed. Personal tax, corporation tax. There's VAT to think about. There's all of this stuff to think about. Of course, you're going to add VAT on top if you are VAT registered, etc., etc. Don't listen to me. Listen to an accountant. Speak to an accountant to understand more about that. I'm not the guy who knows all the gymnastics and stuff. I'm just the guy who's delivering the work. So the point being made is, when you charge based on value, based on that, sick, not this, that, they put your money in your account. Are they going to pay you the 100K straight up? No. Maybe they decide to do it in gates. Okay, maybe they pay you half up front or 25% up front, and then they do it based on milestones and deliverables. Of course, we understand milestones and deliverables change all the time, so you have to think about how all this stuff is going to navigate. The point being made is, whatever way you decide to get charged, or whatever way they accept or determine sort of pay to consultants or contractors, you determine the ceiling. So you have to know your stuff. You have to know your stuff. Okay, this is gold, man. Like me just pumping this stuff out every single day. There are not many doing this, so hopefully you're taking this on board if you are receiving this stuff and you're looking to move into this direction. You've also got one who's reactive and one who's more proactive. So the employee is going to be a bit more reactive by nature, of course, because there is the mindset of stability and I need this, of course, which is understandable because there's a lot depending on this. The other one's more proactive. They understand that they're never safe. So they have to be in positions where they have to create the opportunities of growth. It's that simple, okay? And one is locked up in pay bands and the other can build a brand and increase earnings over time. This is basically what I was talking about, okay? So really and truly, what I want you to take away is that, number one, audit your current skill set and research the current market rates. You can research this stuff through speaking to other contractors and consultants, speaking to agents, they're a good source, going on the market sites yourself and understanding what people are charging. And just have an idea. Just have an idea. I might do a video on this. I might find a central source of information where you can find some rates. But I'll see. Remind me if I haven't done this, okay, in the comments. You also want to make sure that you essentially get an idea of this stuff, so you know what you're charging, you know exactly what benefits you're going to be providing, and then practice negotiating with different individuals. Okay, You can practice negotiating whether you are in your permanent 9 to 5 or not. The point being made is develop those skills. Really, really important stuff. Okay. So a question I want to ask you is, and there's no trick question to this, give me your reasons why. Would you prefer to get a £60,000 a year job permanent? Or would you rather get a £600 a day job for 6 months? What would you prefer to do? I'm genuinely interested to know. And give me your reasons why. £60,000 job, okay, permanent, okay, and you stay there for at least 5 years, whatever it may be, or a £600 a day job, and you're there for at least 6 months. Notice what I'm saying. So leave your comments below. I'd love to know your thoughts. If you want to see more videos centered around contracting, consulting, portfolio careers, all of that kind of stuff there, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.